information about who Steve Gardner is before we get into this episode. So Steve and his wife Elaine would host a small group, which we called a public house for our church, for the last year and a half or so. Every Thursday they would give up their night and a space in their home to go deeper into the Bible and have conversations about what we had talked briefly about the night before in our church's college ministry service. Steve and Elaine were very involved every week in what we were doing and had so much knowledge and experience that they would share with us. The small group started at 6:30, but oftentimes people stayed until 11, midnight, and even sometimes, into the wee hours of the morning, 1, 2, and even 3 o'clock in the morning one time. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of context into why Steve has been so important and influential to me. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. Alrighty, welcome in to episode 5 of the Hoggin and I podcast, hosted by myself, Will Colassa. Today I am joined by Steve Gardner here. So Steve and I met because he was hosting what we called a public house in our church at the time, which is really just a small group that allows us to kind of get deeper into scripture and have more conversations about our faith and kind of what we had talked about prior in at our college ministry. So Steve, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself, just kind of tell them who you are, what you do, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I was born at a very early age. I was born premature, 3 months premature. But before I get off into that, we just thought it was going to be a little Bible study, but it turned into 55 to 75 people.
Oh yeah.
Want to say it was tremendous. I mean, it was, we're the ones that benefited from that most of all, no question about it. But
I would fight you on that, but go ahead.
My story is so long. I'm just gonna, hit some of the highlights and some of the lowlights, and then obviously feel free to interrupt me or to say, Steve, you're going in the wrong direction, or I've got a question here, or whatever, whatever you feel comfortable with. Don't worry about me. Don't worry about my ego or anything like that. You just interrupt me and say, Steve, you're headed in the wrong direction, and I don't really want to edit this video or whatever.
All right.
So, but this does play a part in my story. But my mom was 15, my dad was 18. They had sex. Okay, my mom was younger, my dad was a little older. They had sex, and guess what? It was the first time they ever had sex, and I was the result. So I kind of got off on the wrong foot, and they kind of performed a shotgun wedding in our family. And, for years I've been embarrassed to reveal this to anyone, but if it helps people, I talked to my mom about it. And if it helps people, or we think it might help people, or if it explains me just a little bit, then she said she's okay with it because she overcame that.
Yeah.
But my mom was 15 when she got pregnant, 16 when she had me. I was supposed to be born on January 30th, 1959, and I was born in October. So I was very, born prematurely. And I had some complications. I stayed in the hospital. I weighed just a little over 4 pounds. And back in 1958, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not such a big deal today, but, 65 years ago, that was a big deal. Had a lot of complications and so on and so forth. I had to have surgeries and things like that. And when I got older, and the reason I'm telling you this is because it really laid the foundation for my life. And really laid the foundation to a certain extent for some of the struggles that I would go through later, and then some of the things that I would overcome as a result of fierce determination, if you will.
Okay.
And my dad used to say something like this. He would say, failure will never overtake me as long as my determination to succeed is strong enough. And, I always thought that was great. That was kind of seared into my mind. But, when I was a young kid, I started first grade and I nearly failed second grade, nearly failed third grade.
Okay.
But during that process, I kept improving just a little bit every year. And they discovered that when I, was born, I had some brain damage, and that's not surprising to people that know me. But nonetheless, I kept improving every year. I kept getting a little bit better. I was still in the lowest level in school. We had 3 levels back then. I was in the lowest level, the slow learner group, or whatever you call them, and gradually I bumped up. So by the time I was in 5th grade, I went to the highest level in school. So it took me 4 years to get there.
Gotcha.
And in 5th grade, you're starting to think about girls a little bit, impressing the girls. But one of the things that I was challenged by was not only my intellectual development, but my lack of spiritual development. Okay. And I had cerebral palsy when I was born, and the whole right side of my body was smaller than the left. And that's the same way that it is today, except you really can't see it unless I go swimming or whatever, and you look at my legs. There's a difference between the size of my legs. There's also a difference between my arm on the right side and my arm on the left side, that kind of thing.
Wow. Well, yeah, I never noticed that.
Yeah, I had to have surgeries, and I did a lot of therapy and a lot of exercises, and I tried to hide that for the longest time. I didn't want anybody to know that.
Yeah.
And in 5th grade, you're starting to think about impressing the girls. And of course, I'd have been kind of a loser all my life. I didn't have any self-confidence. My brothers were great athletes. I was not. My dad was a great athlete. He played in college, played ball in college. I was not. So my whole family was great at sports, and I couldn't really play anything well. Okay. So in 5th grade, though, there was a couple of things that happened in 5th grade. I'm going to skip one of them that I don't consider to be relevant.
Okay.
But in 5th grade, I decided to chunk my brace. I decided I don't really need this brace anymore.
Okay.
I don't believe it's doing me any good. So, I took some extra shoes to school. And on the way back home that day, back in those days, we used to walk to and from school, or I did, And so on the way back home from school in Dumas, Texas, I popped my brace in the trash can, in the dumpster.
Okay.
And, I got home and my mom said, "Steve, where's your brace?" And I said, "Mom, it's gone." I threw it in the trash. Why? Because I wanted to do the best I could to become normal. And I could tell you some stories, but I won't get into that. Then I'm going to skip that story. But I kept trying to be normal.
Okay.
And that I'm not. I kept trying to be like everybody else.
Uh-huh.
And I wasn't. And I kept failing. I did pretty good in school, but, made average grades. And I didn't have a girlfriend until I was in like 8th grade. And back then, my dad used to say, "Steve, you're just like a dog chasing a car. You wouldn't know what to do with a girl if you caught her." Now, and my younger brother, he was bigger than me, tougher than me, better looking than me, more confident than me, got all the girls he wanted, And so I'm like, "Oh, you're Sammy's brother." And so I was fighting this battle of a low self-esteem, like when the what was it, Far Side? Yeah, Far Side used to, probably not, you probably don't know much about Far Side. Then again, it's a comic series. And one of them that they put out was, encumbered with low self-esteem, Steve took a job as a speed bump, and so now that didn't come out until later, but that's why I felt like kind of a speed bump. I felt like a loser, didn't do well in school. Without going into too much detail, by the time I was 16, I was suicidal. I was thinking about taking my life every day, multiple times. Now you'd think, well, you got a few things going for you. Why would you think that way? Well, I didn't feel like I had anything going for me, hardly.
Yeah.
And so I thought about taking my life every day. But it's relevant, I think, to what I'm going to talk about, as the story unfolds. Are
Gotcha.
you okay with this?
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Because, we have a lot of this in today's society. We have a lot of people who think about taking their life.
Yeah.
And I never mentioned a word of it to anybody. You're ashamed that you even think that way.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't going to mention it to my parents, to my brother. And my brother and I were really close. We slept in the same room, and had a great relationship. I wasn't going to tell him that.
Yeah.
I just plotted it in the back of my mind. I really didn't want to do it, but I just didn't have enough confidence to really live, and I was not accomplishing my goals. I just couldn't play sports like I wanted to. I started playing golf, and I started doing pretty good there. And my therapy had worked, but I still was not having the success that I wanted. So I was thinking about taking my life on a consistent basis. I won't go into the details of what actually happened and how I planned it and all of that. But I was sitting on my bed after really seriously contemplating suicide and loading the gun and all that. And we were living in an upstairs apartment because my parents had gotten a divorce. And that was one of the things that really shook me. They'd gotten a divorce, and, so that was just another thing, and I kind of blamed God for it, which was wrong to do, but I was 16 years old, so I'm thinking about taking my life, and I'm sitting there on my bed, and I look over at this bookcase at the top of the stairs. And there was this book. I would see it every time I would come up the stairs and turn the corner to come into our room.
Okay.
I would see this book that had a yellow spine. And on the outside of it, it had this title, How to Stop Worrying and Start Living.
Okay.
And so I put the gun down. I didn't put it away, but I put the gun down, and I went over to the bookshelf, and I picked that book off the shelf.
Okay.
And my dad had gotten the book when he took a Dale Carnegie course, and so I was just, pulling that. Okay, that sounds good to me. If I learn to overcome worry, maybe I can have an easier life.
Yeah.
And when I read the first 2 or 3 pages, that's when the game began to change. I kid you not. And I don't know if I showed it to you, but I still got this book here at my house, that very same book.
Wow.
And I didn't write in it because it was my dad's book, and I didn't want him to know that I was reading it, because that's not cool. So I began to read the book, and by the time I was finished with the introduction, I'm thinking, gosh, if somebody had taught me how to think this way, I wouldn't be such a loser, and I was kind of blaming other people. Why hadn't somebody taught me how to think this way? My parents used to say, Steve, if you can't say anything nice, because I was real negative, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, right?
Yeah.
So I was a very quiet child. I looked at the world from a very negative point of view. And so I read the intro to that book, and I thought, man, this is giving me hope. And by the end of the first chapter, I thought my life has changed as of today.
Gotcha.
I'm 16, so, I'm still struggling with a few things, but that day my life changed.
Yeah.
And I took note cards, I took that book and some key principles in that book. I took those principles and I put them on a little note card, because I didn't want my dad I didn't want to mark up the book, and I wanted to make sure that I was applying what was in the book. So I put key principles down on that 3x5 note card and stuck it in my left pocket, so that when I went to school the next day, I could pull it out every now and then and read it.
Yeah.
And that's what I've done since the age of 16.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that was the first time that you started, because I know you showed us that just last year that you were still writing things down. And
Yep. I still do it.
Yeah.
I still do it.
Very
You
cool.
know, all these years later. Why? Because it saved my daggone life.
Mm.
It saved my life. And so I've kept these cards, not the same ones, they change, but I keep these cards in my pocket for what is it now? 55 years or something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
not 50 years. Nonetheless, that laid the foundation for my life. Now I'm going to fast forward this and so from that day forward, I still struggled some, but I began to read books on how to succeed. And I read about 10 of them between the age of 16 and the age of 18. And by the time I'm 18 years old, I'm thinking, I'm bad. I am bad. I'd gotten some girlfriends. I'd been elected president of this organization. And my gosh, I'm feeling good until I go to my high school graduation. There was only 191 graduates, and I was right in the middle,
Wow.
average, the cream of the crap, right? Average. I was just the bottom of the top, average. Okay, so I see Scotty Green go across stage with honors. I wasn't getting any honors. And I'm thinking, Scotty Green, he was a big athlete, I liked him, but I'm Scotty Green he graduated with honors? No. Logan Harbin graduated with honors? These were athletes. These were dudes. I didn't think that, LaDonna Williams was the valedictorian. You got to be kidding me. So right there, I'm thinking, I'm going to go to Texas Tech University. I'm going to change my life. I'm going to make the dean's list. I'm going to become really smart. So, that's kind of what I did. I didn't become really smart, but I tried. I got to Texas Tech University, made the dean's list, first semester, second semester, blah, blah, blah. And, I decided while I was doing that, I'm going to get a master's degree. While I was getting a master's degree, I continued to read books and apply. But while I was getting a master's degree, I started a business. And that business did really, really well. And then a number of years later, after I got my master's degree, built this business out, I started another business. And altogether, I've done about, not quite $700 million worth of business. Now, that's not income, that's revenue. So, but I did become a millionaire. And then I went bankrupt. Oh, Steve, you shouldn't have told them that. Well, that's the story. That's the only story I can tell. There's so many things that I could tell you about that. I mean, we had the great lifestyle. We had the big houses. We had the nice cars, all of that. Why am I telling you that? Because I succeeded. And then I had to start all over again. Well, there was this guy in high school by the name of Tony Watson in high school. And he was talking to a friend of mine. They didn't know that they were both acquainted with me. And so this business partner of mine was talking to Tony Watson, who I went to school with. And this guy told my story. And he said, no, you mean Steve Gardner, Sammy's brother? You mean that guy has done something with his life? And they told me that story, and then I turned it into a speech. And I did a speech in front of 6,000 people entitled, "Yes, Tony, I did something with my life." So and I've gone on to write books, and I've started an organization that is international now. And I'm about to launch a program called Path to Greatness, blah, blah, blah. So I overcame the garbage that I went through in my early days. I turned my setbacks into comebacks, and anybody watching this can do it. You've done it. Will, you have done it. You've turned your setbacks into comebacks. So that's probably too much information. Now it's your turn.
Yeah. So one of the things that that you said earlier about, I think when you said you read the book, and one of the things that you said was, man, I wish someone had told me these kinds of things or had pointed these things out to me about, not being, overcoming worry or whatever, and starting to live. That message is something that I kind of want to do with this. Is one of the main problems is I don't think people get that very much. They, they feel like they have to figure it out by themselves. Um, so do you feel like you were, I guess, using the example of hosting our public house at your house, did you feel obligated to do that so that you could spread that kind of message? Or like, why did you do that? Did you feel like you had some kind of obligation to, pass that knowledge on to other people?
Yes and no. I know that's not really answering the question, but once I'd kind of finished a lot of my business career, I wanted to move from success
Mhm.
to significance.
Okay.
And that's, because I don't think I was put on here on this earth just to make money.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to contribute to the lives of other people. There's kind of a whole long story about how we became involved in this, how we became involved in C3 in the college ministry at the University of Arkansas. And but that's I here's something I forgot when I was kind of recapping my story. When I was 19, I'd been reading positive books for 3 years at that point, and I was changing and growing and making good grades at Texas Tech. And there was this guy that I was good friends with, and he was blind. And we stayed up late one night, and he was thinking about taking his life. And it still bothers me to this day because I know what it feels like to feel that desperate. I had an exam the next morning I was supposed to study for. He was thinking about taking his life, and I stayed up late talking to him, didn't study much for the test, all of that. And the next day, my prayer was, God, if you can help me overcome my pain, I will spend the rest of my life helping other people overcome theirs.
Okay.
And that was kind of there's a lot more that unfolded as a result of that. But to a certain degree, that's what we did. I mean, we built two businesses and all of that, but I was very, very in tune with our employees and our partners and so on. So
Yeah.
yes, I want to give back. I want to go from success to significance.
Mhm.
Okay, success, bankruptcy, success, significance. So you got to throw the bankruptcy in there, which was really, really weird and wild and unfortunate and
Yeah.
very difficult for me to go through.
Gotcha. Yeah. Um, so, one of the other like personal goals that I have, talking to you and talking to other people is to figure out why people like you who have had a major impact on me, like why that is, or how the things that you've told me and the things that you've taught me, how and why those are standing out above other things, other advice or other stories that people have told me. Do you feel like would you say the reason that your story is why people gravitate to your story or to your advice? Because I think it was evident with the other people in the public house that what you were saying really gripped people. I mean, we would stay at your place just talking to you and Elaine for hours, and after our curriculum was over. But do you think why that's something that those that the college kids that were there cared so much about it?
Well, I think it's because we cared. People don't know how much, or they don't care how much you know until they
Mhm.
know how much you care. I think the fact that we cared enough opened up our home. The fact that now you didn't know this initially, but that we had succeeded and
Mhm.
made a lot of money and then failed, and our sincerity. We tried to remember everybody's name. We had a long prayer request when people would mention things, and you wouldn't see this, but I'd reach in my pocket, pull out. I always have a blank note card in my pocket, and I would write prayer requests down as we cared
Mhm.
about those young people, and we cared about you. And I think I'm not a fantastic speaker. I mean, I can tell you about I mean, I did win top three in a speaking contest with 250 other people, but we won't. That's just I'm not really that great. So in the few times that I shared what we'd been through in our life and so on, we didn't get a lot of time to talk because of the nature of the C3 group, which I'm forever grateful for. But I think it's because we cared, because we're genuine, because we admit that we've made mistakes and we've succeeded. Because if we hadn't succeeded, why would anybody listen? Yeah. I've got a friend that lives in a $22 million house. And he said, why do I live in a $22 million house? Because people listen, and he wants to get his message across. Now, that's not the only reason. He lives in a $22 million house. But nonetheless, we want to make a difference. And this is part of the, God, if you'll help me overcome my pain, I'll spend the rest of my life helping other people overcome theirs.
Yeah.
We want to give back. And in my generation, the baby boomers, we let your generation down. We let down the millennials. We have done a bad job. We spent too much money in the government. There's way too much government debt. We were a selfish generation. My generation was a selfish generation. And in one of the books that I wrote, 50 Shades of God, toward the end, I apologize to your generation for how we let your generation down. So I've always felt a little bit of a necessity to give back. Gotcha. But then also when you guys came over, we felt like you guys loved us and listened to us. And so it made us feel great. Yeah. And one time, I don't think, you didn't stay for this, but one time we had some people over here till 3 o'clock in the morning. Another time, 1 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. So it was, most of the people would leave by 9:30 or 10. Then some would, gradually. We were fed by that. We would wake up the next morning and feel so great about that. And we're not near done. And gotcha. we're making a plan now. In fact, I'm doing a challenge in the next couple of weeks called The Power of Purpose. And it is singularly focused on your generation between the ages of 20 and 30 that we have let down. I wrote that book in 2015. So, chapter 29, toward the end of that book, I have a 4-page apology to the generations that my generation let down because we were too dadgum selfish. Okay.
So, stop. Okay. When you say that, what do you think your generation should have done or did wrong specifically that, I guess, what do you think that your generation should have done differently?
Number one, we were too selfish. We were too selfish, too focused on, on fulfilling sexual desires, too focused on secularism, and too selfish. That's just, secularism, sex, and now everybody has sex, right? Okay, but there's times when it's good and times when it's not. So, but our generation was the me generation. They called us the me generation. The hippies, the girls, that went around without bras. Now, I didn't mind that. But it wasn't. We just were selfish, I think. And so and then the government spent too much money on us and we demanded certain things. And there are not enough people, my generation, that you can call on and say, this guy or this girl is culturally relevant. Mm-hmm. My generation just didn't. I've got plenty of examples of people I can point to that say, this person changed my life because they were culturally relevant and they spoke about it. My generation has not been culturally relevant, really. Yeah. So I don't really know all of the reasons why. I'm just now kind of getting into that as I'm preparing this challenge on the power of purpose. But, okay. I felt a burden that we messed up. In the courts, the Supreme Court started going, a little too far to the left to a certain degree. And I could go through that when they kind of outlawed the Bible, when they kind of outlawed prayer in the public schools, blah, blah, blah. When abortion came along, blah, blah, blah. I could go through that. It wasn't just the baby boomers, it was the courts. But, too many people in my generation were too in love with making money and not in love enough with God, and not in love enough with their kids. And so this is what is our nation is a result. Why do
Yeah.
you think the boomers are doing like, okay, boomer? The your generation is like, oh, these boomers, y'all know, and we've been that way. And
Yeah.
I'm admitting it. And I've said that for years. So I'll get my message together and then I'll let you know.
Do
But
you do you think that my generation, and do you think that we are taking on that selfishness? Because that's what I see now. Is I feel like, maybe just with social media being able to broadcast, so many more people can say what they want and find a much larger audience. But I see selfishness as something that is still very prevalent, or at least in my experience, more prevalent now.
it is, it is. Man, they caught our disease.
Yeah.
And we did not, there's this thing going on called the de-churching of America. Well, largely it's because of our generation. It started with our generation, and then it's just kind of gotten worse, I think, as time has gone on. And because we didn't care enough, and because we didn't live the values as well as we should, and because we didn't care enough for our kids, then we're experiencing these, a little bit more narcissism as a result. Because
Okay.
a lot of the generation that came after me, the millennials, so to speak, they didn't go to church as much as the boomers, because the boomers were they kind of had a selfish type of religion, if you will, selfish type of Christianity that wasn't as genuine as it should have been. And so they go like, the millennials were going like, why should I buy into that? And then it's just gotten worse, since then. And your generation's probably not any more selfish than we were, but we started it,
Gotcha.
and it's just been a contagion. And it's like, why should I listen to these people? So, and
Gotcha.
everybody, with respect to their parents, everybody wants to look at their parents and say, okay, my parents did this, and this wrong. And all they focus on is what the parents did wrong. They don't focus on what the parents did right.
Yeah.
I did the same thing. So at any rate, that's just my knee-jerk reaction to that. I've got to think about it more,
Gotcha.
but I don't. If these young people grew up seeing selfishness, then they're more likely to be selfish. At the same time, I think more of them are getting fed up, and they're committing to causes, maybe perhaps in a way that we didn't. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I know that we were wrong. That the generations that went before us, one of them is called the greatest generation that fought in World War II. The other one is called the silent generation. Well, they weren't so silent after all. There were a lot of good examples that we could follow. We didn't always like the way they dressed and what they did, but they had these values that we could follow. Whereas my generation, I'm being too critical about my generation, but I feel that way. So I'm just,
Gotcha.
being honest about it.
Yeah.
And I think we let everybody down. We let America down. And now, well, I won't get into politics, but that's a long topic.
Yeah. So and another term that you used recently, or just a couple minutes ago, is culturally relevant. And I know that was something that you were talking about. I guess it was just last semester. That you felt like that was you had to become more culturally relevant. Can you give kind of an update as to how you're going about that, or where you are in that, or just overall what that means?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really, when I saw Emma Stone say to her dad in the movie Birdman, which the movie wasn't that great, but this one little clip where Emma Stone is talking to Michael Keaton, her dad, and he's an aging movie star that's lost his relevance or whatever. He was Birdman, so to speak, Batman, whatever. but the movie's Birdman, and she looks at him and she's mad at him because, Dad, you're all worried about whether or not you matter,
Mm.
and you don't, because he made himself culturally irrelevant, and that just burned something in my brain. So I thought, okay, how can I become culturally relevant? One of
Mm.
the ways that I'm doing this, I put together a program called the Path to Greatness, which is what it's really kind of the success principles that have worked over the course of my life. And we're going to be launching that in the next, I won't go into how I showed it to 4 web developers. 3 of them said, hey, that looks great. Let's make a few tweaks, and here's how much, we'll charge you for that. No problem. Then the 4th one said, this is dead on arrival. What? I put so much time into this, you don't understand this. Well, it doesn't work the same way. Marketing online and going viral online doesn't work the way that it used to. So this thing is not going to fly. And I'm like, what? I thought I was 2 days from, so I won't go off into all that. But we're getting ready for the launch. Path to Greatness it teaches people how to go from good to great at what they do.
Gotcha.
And so, I didn't mean for that to be an advertisement, but that's one of the ways that I want to become culturally relevant. Yeah. And most of the people seeing this right now never heard of me, but in 5 years, you will get sick of me because I'm going to make myself culturally relevant. And for the first time in history, we've got the web that can reach the cell, more than 5 billion cell phones in people's pockets and purses. Yeah. So never has it been more possible to be able to touch so many lives. So at the age of 65, I'm about to turn 65. At the age of 65, I'm going to be more relevant than I've ever been. Yeah. And so that there's a whole plan, Path to Greatness, Path to Godliness, First Quest University. So and you see all these books behind me. You've been in my house. Yeah. I do research, so I'm very curious, and I want to take the best of this. I've taken the best of this information, and I'm about to publish it online. Yeah. So,
can you kind of describe all of what you've got back there in those bookshelves?
Wow, quickly. It just happened because I started out with one notebook and, built it, and it just evolved over time. I guess when I was in my 30s, I started putting together one notebook, 2 notebooks, and it covers everything from science, physics and evolution and creation and the existence of God, apologetics and the Bible, and a lot of the stuff behind me. There's too much. There's too many notebooks.
But just overall, each one of those binders is labeled with some topic, and then within there's a pages of research about that specific topic.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it's an obsession of mine. I apologize to my wife on a consistent basis. But she's in with the cause. I mean, she's seen me develop. She knows who I am. She knows what I've wanted to do all these years, and now I'm about to do it. But every notebook, some notebooks are more developed than others. Mm-hmm. A lot of the stuff directly behind me is the principles of greatness. Mm-hmm. And I use 102 celebrities, athletes, leaders, musicians, Reese Witherspoon, Michael Jordan, Taylor Swift, people that are culturally relevant, mm-hmm. so that other people will listen. How did they succeed? Yeah. What drove Michael Jordan? So, a lot of the stuff behind me and over to the side is research on how people became great.
Gotcha. Cool. And then
stuff I couldn't squeeze into here, it's in my wife's office. It's in the dining room,
Yep, I've seen them all. There's I don't know how many of those you got, but it's a lot.
Almost 900.
Jeez. Okay. Well, there you go.
There's some in the garage now, and I can't.
Oh, really?
I can't get rid of them.
So, I guess just to wrap up, what would you say is the most important piece of advice that you could give to someone, or I guess either that you have been given yourself or that you would give to someone now?
Okay, I'm I'm going to get a little spiritual on you.
Sounds
You
good.
asked me, so I'm going to tell it.
Sounds good.
My granddad was about to die. And so I got a video camera back in the days when you had a big old video camera. This was 1997. I got my video camera set up and I interviewed both sets of my grandparents. And they were phenomenal. And my granddad is just a few months away from dying.
Okay.
And, we've done this great interview and it's just precious. And my grandmother gets on there and she describes some things and she starts crying. And it's just, man, you feel like, man, I should have done this a long time ago. And then he looks into the camera, just straight into the camera, and points into the camera. And he says, Steve, Matthew 6:33 says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these other things will be added. And he said, Steve, that's not second, that's not third, that's not fourth, that's first. And so, my bank account, Matthew 6:33, MATT 6:3. So I know I just told everybody, but that's what I used to log in because that was 97. I wanted to remember that. Matthew 6:33, every day of my life, that's what I should be seeking to do. But let's not just walk with God and put Jesus first. Let's put other people first.
Yeah.
And as far as success, I mean, you can't just be a Christian without trying to succeed. You can't just become a Christian and sit back and let God do it. He's waiting on you to become great. He wants you to step out there, and when you've done the best you could, then he can step in and help you. Gotcha. But you gotta be committed to success principles. And the most important thing in succeeding is, why do you want it? What is your reason? What is your purpose?
Yeah.
And Tim McGraw sang a song. What was it? How bad do you want it? How bad do you need it?
Gotcha.
And that really is where everything starts, because if you don't have enough fire, if you don't have enough reason to do something, you're not going to become great.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, I love Michael Jordan. And there were 7 things that drove him to success. That's one of the things that I exposed in this program. 7 things that drove him to success. And if he didn't have those things, he wouldn't be successful. Yeah. And people are just, sitting back, not doing enough to become great on their own. It all starts with the dream. It all starts with deciding what you want your life to be about. What is your purpose? So,
gotcha.
If you don't have the purpose, then you're going to live an average life. And average, is not good unless you've done the best you could. But most of us have not done the best that we could.
Yeah.
And God kind of expects us to go from good to great. He says it in his word. He doesn't want us to be average. We can't impact the world for the most part if we're average. So at any rate, enough of that.
Very cool. Well, this has been awesome. I really do appreciate you coming on and
thank you
talking with me.
Thank you for who you are and the obstacles you've overcome to be who you are now. And thank you for being culturally relevant.
Yeah.
This. Go ahead.
That's what I'm going for. That was something that, when I heard you say that last semester, it was, I was a little not confused, but I didn't understand exactly what you meant by that, but it was definitely something that I remembered. And that I've tried to take to heart. So,
well, why not? Why not become culturally relevant? There's never been a better time, and there's never been more of a need.
Yeah.
For people getting the right information into their minds and hearts than there is today. With the mental health issues that we have in our society, you think it was back, 60 years ago when I grew up, man, it's worse now. People got more to worry about.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, they got stinking thinking, halitosis of the mind, because that's the way they've been taught. And they need to learn to get rid of the stinking thinking and not to worry so much.
Yeah.
But that's easier to say. You can't just say, I'm not going to worry anymore. I mean, you could try that, but it takes some note cards in your pocket, pulling them out. And, that's what I have to do to redirect my thoughts.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful for you and the fact that you're stepping up to become culturally relevant. You've always been cool. You've always been cool. You just have this je ne sais quoi, or, because some people walk in the door and they look like me, average, or whatever.
I
You
disagree.
walk in the
I
door and
disagree.
you're okay, this guy's somebody. He's got a presence about him. And you guys, you and Tyler and Lucas and blah, 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 we're real proud of you.
Yeah.
Real
Well,
proud.
we really appreciate that. And, it means a lot coming from you and Elaine. So,
Thank you.
yeah, you tell her that I said hello as well.
I'll do it. I'll do it.